Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. We are in our final week of this quarter, so kind of hard to believe. We've been through quite a few lessons, actually 20 of them so far, if you've been keeping count, because we're on lesson 21 tonight. This morning, it's not night yet. And this lesson is about tending that zeal fire and imitating your heroes. That's the subtitle of this lesson. So imitating heroes. And I think this is a good way to consider how to continue in zeal throughout your life, because there's always someone to look up to, someone that you can relate to, and that's very helpful. So this morning our goal is to look at how do we look at people in the Bible, for one, but also people around us, and how do we get encouragement from that? So we're going to try to look at that, think about that this morning as we start. But Brian McDonald, would you care to lead us in a prayer?
Pretty good. Most righteous Heavenly Father, we come before your throne this morning, thanking you for this day, this first day of the week that you bless us with. Thank you, Lord, for this time that you've given us to assemble ourselves together, dear Heavenly Father, to open your word, study from it. Pray that you be with us as students, help us to open our hearts and minds to your word, help us to see how we can apply those things to our lives, Lord, so we may be better Christians, be more pleasing in your sight. Lord, we ask that you be with the teachers of this hour. We're thankful for them, we're thankful for the time, the energy, and the effort that they put into preparing lessons and guiding these classes, and guiding our thoughts. Pray, dear Heavenly Father, that the things that they prepared come readily to them. Lord, we're so thankful for your Son and our Savior, Christ Jesus. He who gave us this day, who made this avenue of prayer and our hope of salvation possible. Lord, it's only through his righteousness that we can stand before you on this day of worship. We're thankful for his blood, for taking away our sins. You need to be with us this morning. We pray that everything that's done and said during our worship rises to you as a sweet savor, Lord. We pray that you're happy and you're pleased with what we're doing here this morning. All these things we ask in the name of your Son, Christ Jesus. Amen.
Thank you very much. On page 102, lesson 21, the verses at the top of this is 1 Peter 5, verses 6 and 7. Would someone care to read that for us to open us up?
Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in the proper time, casting all your anxiety on him, because he cares for you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So when you think about it, especially, just look at the heroes of the Bible. If you think about what they did, how they responded to the situations around them, how they lived faithfully, it's interesting to consider while they were going through whatever they were going through, and they were doing the tough decisions, they were making those tough calls and doing everything, they were very humble in those things, hopefully. And it's when we humble ourselves before God that he will exalt us in due time. Now, this passage, we normally look at this in a much different light, as far as you live your life to be humble and you serve the Lord, and eventually you'll get your reward for that. And that's true. I think we see that in here. But think about it from the aspect of like our biblical heroes, those who have went before us in the faith. They were very humble. They served the Lord with all they had. They weren't looking for personal accolades and glory and all that. But when we look at those stories and we look at those characters, we're like, wow, like they're really cool. Like they're just really inspirational, and we see what they did and we see their faithfulness, and it's just really impressive and it really stands out to us. And so we realize that the more humble we are, the more God will exalt us. And so these people in the Bible were exalted because they were humble, because they were able to submit themselves to the Lord, and that whole like casting your anxiety on him because he cares for you. That's just a little added bonus there. Helps us to continue in that. But you look at the heroes of the Bible, humility should be a word that pops up automatically, and that's something that helps them stand out. Let's look at this little warming up section as well. Turn to Daniel 3. I think this is obviously a familiar passage, but I think it's really cool. Daniel 3. What three characters are we going to see in Daniel 3? Yeah, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. And do you know what they were famous for? First of all, question, where were they?
Babylon.
Yeah, they were in Babylon. All right, so they were in Babylon. Were they Babylonian? No, they were Jewish. They came from Judah. They were part of the group that was taken before Jerusalem finally collapsed and all that. But they were taken and they were put under the king's rule and all this. So who was king at the time of Babylon? Nebuchadnezzar, pretty good guy, right? He was like very kind and generous. No. He was not the king that you would want to cross. He is not someone that messed around. And so when you are in front of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of the world, the one who is like ruthless, and he's done so many things and so many terrible things to a lot of people, that can be kind of intimidating. But then Nebuchadnezzar sets up this big idol and is like, hey, everybody's going to bow down and worship when we have these instruments playing. What did these three guys do? They didn't. They were like, no, we can't do that. Like, we serve the Lord. We can't serve this false god because it's a false god. So they stood up for what was right. Now, they were given several chances. Like, Nebuchadnezzar was like, well, I'll give you one more chance. You do it. Let's see what happens. And there was an interesting statement that he makes at the end of verse 15. So he's talking about what they should do, like this whole situation. But then the last phrase that he says in verse 15, what God is there who can deliver you out of my hands? If that's not a setup, I don't know what is. So he was like, nobody can do anything against me. You know, I am the most powerful and you are going to bow to me. Well, in verses 16 through 18, these three guys were like, no, we don't even need to give you an answer. Like, you're not even worthy of that. But someone read verses 17 and 18.
If that is the case, your God, whom you serve, is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the golden image which you have set up.
Awesome. Thank you very much. So Nebuchadnezzar just said, what kind of God is there that can deliver you? And these guys were like, well, I know one, and he will deliver us. But even if that's not the case, just know we're not going to bow to you. Like, that's not what, we're not going to do that. Just imagine, like, the courage that took. Like, just because knowing you're face to face with, like, the most powerful man in the world. And you know what he's done, and you know what he's capable of. And you see this big furnace in front of you. Like, you know what's going to happen to you. Like, he has not, like, made it, he made it known, this is what's going to happen. And so they were going to be thrown in there, and I like the statement here that's made. Heroes are the people of God whose fire within is greater than any fire without. That's clever there. I like that because they see the fire, but the fire that was burning inside was much brighter, much bigger. By the way, side note, words of wisdom here, and this is a Meredith Bridgman exclusive. If we are on fire for God, we will always let our light shine because fire brings light. What do you think about that? Yeah, I like that. So they definitely let their light shine in the midst of this fiery situation. And there's a lot of characteristics here that are just awesome. They were willing to do this, even in the face of this just monumental task, but they were humble. And do you notice, like, they're not, like, overly disrespectful to the king here, even. Like, they did say, we don't have to give you an answer. But then they kept calling him, like, "O king." Like, they still had that aspect, too. And so people who are really zealous, who are on fire for the Lord, recognize that he's in control, and he's the one who holds everything together. But that doesn't make them jerks, you know. They still were doing what they needed to do. All right, anything on any of that before we jump into the lesson? Okie dokie. Sparks of passion. There are heroes all around. And we see heroes in the Bible. Hopefully, you have somebody in the Bible that you keep going back to, that you're like, this person right here, that's who I want to imitate. And there's a lot of stuff that we could say about that we read their stories, we read the good things that they did, we read the things where they kind of fell in some ways, and that helps us to see that God can work through people of all kinds of different walks of life. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I know we moved on past them, but whether them or anybody else that's been in that type of position, that, even if he does it, it's still deliverance. It's still good, it's still deliverance, because where do they wind up for what they've done?
Right.
So it's still, either way has always been good.
Amen.
Exactly.
Exactly.
It's a horrible situation.
Yeah.
Being in the Colosseum and all of that, being torn apart and all of that.
Right.
The deliverance from all of that is just amazing.
Amen. The way that the Lord delivers might look different than we want it to look or what we expect. And I mean, you think about this, some people who stood up for what was right were delivered from the fiery furnace. Some people who stood up for what was right lost their life because of it. And there's some of that. And we don't always know why. What's the difference between this person? Why was this person allowed to live and this person not? Well, that's for God to decide, and there it is. But regardless, they have their reward. And God is the one who can exalt you, even if it's not in this life, especially if it's not in this life. So we realize that, and part of this lesson we're going to see, it's the ability to look forward and just realize that things past this life are much more important than anything that we can have right here in this life. So hopefully these heroes help us to change our perspective, because their focus was much different than what a lot of people are focused on. A lot of times we look around and we can get very discouraged because the world's just terrible. It is this life can be really awful a lot of times, and that's what living in the flesh under the sun does. But when you see people who are standing up for what's right, it does give us a little extra hope, like a little extra spark of courage. If someone else does the right thing, you're more likely to say, yeah, I can do that too. And I think that this helps when we see people in those situations who are able to do that. They've blazed an amazing trail for Christians to follow. They have lived the life that we need to live, and we're really thankful for that. We're really encouraged by that. So that's what I hope that we can get from our heroes in the faith. So let's look at this next section. Heroes inspire Christians to go big. That's good. And if you think about it, a lot of times, we don't like to get outside of our comfort zone. And we don't want to really go above and beyond. We just, and this can be in different aspects of life, but if you think about when someone first becomes a Christian, sometimes what happens is they become a Christian and they're like, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing, but I'm also going to come to worship and do these other things. I'm just going to add in some things to my life, not make any major changes. Is that a good idea? Just to go in and keep doing what you've been doing? Nah. We got some major changes to make. We have been living for ourselves. We need to be living for the Lord. There's an awesome contrast here that he mentioned. Turn to Luke 18. I think it's really interesting how these stories are arranged in the book of Luke. So Luke 18, verses 18 through 30. He keeps talking about it a little after as well. But who was this? Who was this person that came to Jesus? Yeah, rich young ruler. And that's what we know about him. We know that he was rich and he was a ruler of some sort, and apparently kind of young. All right, so we have that. In verse, verse 23. Someone could read Luke 18:23.
And when he heard this, he was very sorrowful, for he was very rich.
Okay, so what exactly was he sad about? The rich young ruler.
He saw us.
Yeah. Jesus was like, okay, you've done all this other stuff, like you're doing pretty well. There's one thing that you are really holding on to. Like, you really care a lot about your riches, your wealth. Like, that is the thing that motivates you. That's what you have like a firm grasp on in this world. And so that's the thing that's going to keep you from heaven. So you need to loosen your grasp a little bit, step back, and give that to the poor, follow me. And that was his instructions. And the rich guy was like, but I got a lot. And so I can't do that. And so he went away, and he was sad because he was very rich. Now, compare that. So verse 23, he was extremely rich. Compare that with Luke 19, verse 2. There was a man by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. This is really cool because this is just a few verses separated. I think we're supposed to see this as a direct contrast. So we see the rich young ruler who was rich and sad because of what Jesus asked him to do, compared to Zacchaeus, who was rich. But what was Zacchaeus' response to Jesus?
Stop him out.
Yeah, he sought him out. He went to find him. And he was a short guy, so he's like, I'm going to do whatever I can to see him. So he climbed up in that tree. And then when he was there, what did Jesus say to him? Yeah, I'm going to have dinner with you. So I'm going to come and I'm going to eat with you. And what was the response of the people around it? Verse 7. Yeah. Why were they mad? Yeah. How do you know Zacchaeus was a sinner?
Because he's a tax collector, that's how they would have
Exactly. And not only was he a tax collector,
rich.
he was rich. He was the chief tax collector.
He embezzled it all.
So he was the chief embezzler. So he was the tax collector of the tax collectors. He was like in charge of everyone. So if there's anyone that they hate, it's that guy. And do you think that the people were they? Well, I don't want to say. Well, let's just go with that. Were they justified in thinking that he had done some pretty bad things? Probably that he had probably like taken a lot of money, and he was whatever. He was rich because of it, whatever. And so because of that, because of his situation, you might think, all right, this guy, he's no good. We just saw what happened when this other rich guy came, and he was told to give everything away. Jesus didn't even say anything to Zacchaeus yet. He didn't even mention any of that. But what did Zacchaeus do when Jesus said, come, I want to have dinner with you?
He spoke up and said what he was going to do with the money.
Yeah.
He knew what his issues were.
Did. Yeah, he was like, okay, I know why y'all are upset. And I know because that's who I was. That's what I did. Like, I did take from people that I didn't deserve it and all that. And so he said, I'm going to give up half my possessions to the poor. If I have defrauded anything from anybody, I will give them back 4 times as much. What word would we use to describe his attitude there? Repentant. I mean, you could tell he had some fruits from repentance. And he was willing to give up what he had done before in order to follow Jesus. Just imagine that situation. Like you want to see Jesus, and you know he's a great teacher, and you want to have that close interaction with him. And then he tells you, hey, I'm coming, I'm spending the afternoon with you. And then everybody around you is like, that guy? Like, he is so unworthy. This is ridiculous. Why would he choose him? Like, doesn't he know what kind of person this is? Like, how would you feel in that situation? Like, if you were the one in the tree, and Jesus is saying that to you, and everybody's like grumbling, do you think everyone around you is probably telling the truth? None of us really deserve Jesus, right? We don't deserve that connection, but he offers it. Now, what do we do with that, though? Like, how do we respond in that situation? Hopefully, we respond in a very Zacchaean way, instead of rich young ruler type way, willing to give up anything that we need to in order to please the Lord, in order to have that relationship with him, to make things right. So, maybe for us, maybe it is our wealth. Because, I mean, we live in America, and a lot of us are much more wealthy than the entire world. I would say probably every single person in this room is much more wealthy than like the world's average income, right? And so maybe that's the thing that is holding you back. Maybe you have too firm of a grasp on your riches, on wealth, or attaining wealth, or maybe that's your pursuit. But maybe that's not you at all. Maybe there's something else that you're really holding on to and you're really pursuing. And you're like, I can give anything up except for this. Well, if you're thinking that, that's probably the thing that you need to give up. That's what you need to like back off on, so you can finally give yourself to the Lord. And so that's it. Biblical heroes, the people who do the right things, they go big. You know, it's like, well, you know, I'm going to try to start, you know, not taking as much money from people. Like Zacchaeus could have done that. He could have said, I'll cut back on how much taxes I take out. You know, instead of keeping an extra 50% for myself, I'll only keep 20% for myself. Like, he's not like that. He's like, no, I'm going to pay it back. Like, I want to fix what I did in the past. And I think that indicates where his mind was for the future. Like, do you think Zacchaeus continued to cheat, swindle? I would say hopefully not. But his mindset right here, he wanted to please the Lord. And that's what we need to have. We need to have that mindset. Like, I want to please the Lord no matter what. No matter what it costs me. No matter what, like, social standing, whatever. It's like, I don't care. I want to do what the Lord wants me to do. And that is the focus. And that is what we see in Zacchaeus for sure. Especially compared to this other guy. What other thoughts or comments do you have on that?
Just the idea that there's some ruler. I mean, obviously he's a ruler. His riches were probably not forgotten. We would think he doesn't act like that in any way. In fact, he says he's kept all he can. So you got to think he's one of these people who has worked hard. He's built this money for himself, or his parents have worked hard. He's grown into a place where he's built himself into a position where he is wealthy. And we would say on earth though that it's deserved. And that you work hard, you get that money. That's how it works. Whereas Zacchaeus, I think you see someone whose conscience is probably pricked every day, maybe even subconsciously, by the fact that his wealth comes from the fact that he's stealing from everyone else. And so I just think you have these two different approaches to Christ. One kind of comes up to Christ with a return ruler and a prideful attitude. Not necessarily like it, you kind of have to read it into it. Read into it that he's coming up there like, hey, what do I have to need to do for salvation? Well, I've done all that, you know. It's just one of those things like, okay, like, where's the humility, right? Where's the Christ? I'm giving away everything, I'm following you. Whereas Zacchaeus, that's exactly what he does. He sees his chance for salvation, and he says, okay. So it's one of the things to me. It's almost a dichotomy between someone who knows that they're evil and separated from God, and someone who's pretending that they're not evil. Right? And so you have two different responses from that.
That's a really good point. And it matters how we come to Jesus. That the prideful attitude in the rich young ruler, I think we definitely see that. I mean, when he said that comment about, I've kept all the commandments from my youth up. It's like, really? Like, did you really? You're probably not. You're probably thinking too highly of yourself. So I think we do see the pride in that. And, I mean, think about how the people around them were acting. When you see the rich young ruler got essentially rejected, turned down, he went away sorrowful, everyone around was like, whoa, Jesus, what are you doing here? Like, why would you do that? If this guy couldn't come and follow you, then who can? Who can be saved? And I think sometimes we get that mentality ourselves. I mean, it's just like whatever position you're in, if we're not willing to humble ourselves, and this goes back to the very first verse we started with in 1 Peter 5, we have to humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God in order to be exalted. We can't come to him with any kind of pride, any kind of like, I have attained this, I've earned this, I am where I am because I am so awesome. We got to leave all that at the door and really, really give up what makes us who we are, to come to him. That was good stuff. That was really good stuff. Mary.
What you also don't see that he's doing is blaming others for what he's done. He could have said, "Oh, well, everybody's doing it. All the other tax collectors are doing the same thing, and so we likewise need to take responsibility." And I mean, the rich young ruler was not maybe the blame, but he was kind of like, I'm doing all these things, so I mean, like, maybe I'm doing anything wrong. But yeah, so we need to not make excuses for ourselves and also not put the blame on other people. Because Zacchaeus, when they were like, he's a sinner, he would have been like, what are you talking about?
That's a really good thought too. I appreciate that, because I mean, we do have this concept of personal accountability, and you think about how these situations could have played out differently, and the kind of excuses, and even going back to like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Think about what they could have done. Like, everybody else is worshiping this statue. They could have been like, okay, it's time to bow down. If I don't bow down, they're going to kill me. So I'm not really going to worship this statue. Oh, look, I need to tie my shoe. Like, and they not at the same time. You know what I'm saying? Like, but they were like, no, I'm not going to make any kind of excuses. I'm not going to have any kind of appearance of evil. I'm going to stand up for what's right because it is the right thing. And that's just some ramblings there, but good connections. Any other thoughts on any of that? Yeah, Shane.
Just looking at it from the other side of the coin, when it comes to the people themselves, it's kind of a lesson for us not to fall into their rut. They, with Zacchaeus, immediately see him as a sinner. They don't see the good of him sitting down at the table with our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ to be healed of his sin. And they don't realize on the second part of that they themselves are sinners. For all men have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. So they're completely missing the point. They're not concerned with this man's soul, only that he's a sinner. And they're not looking at themselves to say, we ourselves are sinners, but we're no better than Zacchaeus. And then when you go back to the rich young ruler, the same thing. They think because of his prosperity, how good he's got in life, he's got to be a great man. But they're not looking beneath the surface at what's deep down.
Mm-hmm. That is a really good point. A good way to look at that. Because, I mean, what does it take to come to Jesus? I mean, it's this mindset that I am a sinner and I need him. And that's what Jesus said to the Pharisees. Remember when he was like eating with the tax collectors and sinners? What the Pharisees said about him? It was like, what is this guy doing? Doesn't he know what kind of people they are? And he said, a doctor isn't for people who think they're well. It's those that know that they're sick, that know that they need it. Now, the Pharisees were very sick. They just pretended like they weren't. And that was the issue. They didn't know that they needed him. So we need to have that humble attitude of knowing we're sinners. All have sinned. We fall short. So we know we need God because we cannot do it on our own. And it's that humble attitude, the willingness to set aside our own pride and come to him. And that's what we see. All these Bible characters that we look at as heroes of faith, like, they have vastly different personalities. They do vastly different things, different walks of life. But the thing that holds all of them in common and puts them all together is the humility, is the ability to say, it's not about me, I'm going to please the Lord. And that's what we continually see all throughout the Bible. And but then on the other side of that, people who are really like strong Bible characters that mess up sometimes, you know what causes the mess up? When they stop being humble and stop submitting to the Lord and take too much on themselves. I mean, think Moses, the most humble man in the world. And then what was his great sin? Yeah, striking the rock. And he was like, why do I have to keep... No, I didn't mean to hit that. Why do you people keep coming to me for this? And must I provide water for you again? It's like, dude, you weren't the one providing the water. And so even sometimes the strong people of faith, they lose sight of it. And that helps us to see, okay, I can't be like that. I need to constantly have an attitude of humility, constantly submitting to the Lord. And that is the key to success. Absolutely. Any other thoughts on any of that? Awesome discussion, guys. Thank you for that. Now, this next part, heroes keep Christians humble. This is related to what we were just saying. And you think about people that the world elevate and that the world look at as being their idols, the celebrities, and the things that we praise about them, and what that does for people. When we look at people in that way, it can spark some jealousy. It's like, why can't I be like that? Why can't I have that? Maybe a little envy, and those sorts of things. But when we look at Bible characters, hopefully that does inspire some, I want to be like that, but I want to be humble like that. And I want to live my life to draw the spotlight to God and not ourselves. The entire 1st and 2nd Corinthians, if you read through those letters that Paul wrote, this was a group of people who were very centered on who they were following, on who the great teachers were. And they took pride in who they listened to. It's like, well, I listen to this guy. Or I am of Paul. I am of Apollos. I am of Cephas. And like they were very focused on the teachers. And there were some false teachers that came in that were taking advantage of that. Who were like, yes, I am your teacher and you will pay me money. And there was a lot of that went on. But constantly throughout 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Paul is like, guys, no. It's not about that. It's about being one in Christ. It's about being taught by Christ. And in 2 Corinthians 4:7, we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that the surpassing greatness of the power will be of God and not from ourselves. And remember, Paul keeps coming to, and I think it was 2 Corinthians 2. I come to you and I preach only Christ and Him crucified. Like the power of the gospel is not in the presentation of the message. It's not in the presenter, I should say. It's not the one who is teaching, but it is in the gospel itself. The power is God. So it doesn't matter who's doing the teaching. It doesn't matter who's like leading that. The power is in the message. It is the gospel that is the power of God. And we need to remember to eliminate that pride. I'm just a clay jar. I'm just this earthen vessel. Just imagine, I took a little bit of mud and then shaped it into a little cup, and it's what's in the cup that's important. It's not the cup. When we focus on people too much, and we're focused on how great that person was, it's like a gift. You're familiar with the concept of opening a gift. You got like wrapping paper in a box, and then the gifts inside the box. It's like opening a gift and being like, that wrapping paper was so cool. Like, I'm going to keep that wrapping paper. I should probably like frame it, like put it on the wall and hang it up, and then totally forget about the gift that's inside. That's the same thing when we focus too much on the person instead of the message. So all characters in the Bible that we read of that are doing the right thing, they look at themselves as messengers of God, as instruments of His. And that's what we should be doing too. That is our goal, and that's what we should focus on. Any thoughts on that? We got to say that because sometimes we do feel like, okay, I'm going to be like Zacchaeus, and I'm going to give away half my stuff, and I'm going to do all of these good charitable deeds for people, and I'm going to give, and I'm going to really sacrifice in my life. Sometimes the devil hijacks that and uses that as our sense of pride. Be like, oh, look how much I've given up for the Lord. It's like, okay, you're starting to think too highly of yourself. So we need to keep constantly coming back. Again, the problem of Moses with the rock. So just remember that. Keep that in mind. Next part, heroes renew Christians' optimism in others. And this is one of the most, well, I wouldn't say most exciting parts, but one of the more helpful parts of the Bible to think about, and good indication that the Bible is actually what it claims to be. Because, just imagine, if humans, no, let me take that back. How are history books written? Who usually gets to write the history books and what happens in history? The victors, yeah. And so when they write down what happened, you have a very one-sided approach, and it's like, look how great our group was. Look how successful we were. And they typically leave out the bad parts. And let's just skim over that stuff because we're awesome and these people were evil and it was great. We did so good. And that's how people write stories and even write real events. They shade it a certain way. If the Bible were written by people and people alone, the mind of man, do you think we would ever see any kind of bad qualities in any of the strong leaders? Probably not. But how many bad qualities do we see in almost every leader? A bunch. And you see all of that. I mean, David, saw what he did. Moses, saw what he did. Abraham, even, he was a liar. Man, there were so many things that these people did, and it's like, really? Like, how could they be useful for the Lord? You know, can God work through people who are just sinners and totally miss the point and don't get it? Well, yeah, he can. Acts chapter 1, when Jesus was ascending, he was getting ready to go back to heaven. He was like, all right, I've spent enough time with you guys and you carry on. What was the last question that the disciples asked him? Yeah, what about this kingdom thing, God? Jesus, when are we going to do that? And he's like, it's not for you to know. See ya. And he leaves. And it was those people who took the message and turned the world upside down and spread that. And so it's really encouraging to us when we see people who have failed multiple times being the ones that God works through to accomplish his will in the world. God can work through us. God can do great things through people who are willing to humble themselves and do the right thing. Now, I want us to think about that personally, but I also want to us to think about that in other people. Because sometimes it's easy to get discouraged. Like, what if there was somebody that you looked up to, like a hero in the faith that you're personally connected to in your life, but you find out, like, when they were young, they did something terrible. Like, what would that do to you? And what would that make you think? I mean, it's like, well, I need to throw everything away because this person wasn't 100% faithful their entire life. It's like, no, we see that in other people, and we see that in Bible characters. Use that to be like, okay, I'm not going to make that mistake. I'm not going to do that. But the things that were good and the things that they did do with a humble heart and serve the Lord, we're going to really focus on that. And that's going to be what drives us and motivates us. Sometimes I think we have unrealistic expectations of other people. A lot of times we have unrealistic expectations of other people. So we need to remember that. We need to remember that we're all human, all have sinned, and we fall short of the glory of God. But we need to work hard to see the good in what's happening and see the good in others. So instead of getting really super discouraged, we can find people in our lives that really have touched us and motivate us and help us to see through that. So there you go. Any other thoughts on that? Yeah, Shane.
Just on the whole idea of you talking about, people we look up to today, the people's heroes, things like that. There's always that saying I've heard of, never meet your hero.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you meet your hero, you're going to be disappointed.
Right.
Because the image of what you think they are is always far greater than the reality. But with these Bible characters, what we see from their lives is it's all on paper. We know exactly the type of person they were. There's no deception. But with people today, they're like, oh, that basketball star, this movie star, and then when you meet them in life, they're so disappointed.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I appreciate that because, I mean, the way that we judge people, a lot of times it is like we have this celebrity superstar type mentality. And then it's like that doesn't live up to what we expect. But with people in the Bible, we see exactly what was up and we see what was good and what was bad as well. And so it all depends on our focus and what we're looking for and what we're hoping to see there. A couple other things from this lesson I want to make sure that we touch on. The next section is heroes remind Christians to leave the past behind. So the past can be a huge stumbling block to people for multiple reasons. What did Paul have in his past that he could look back to that he could have trusted in and could have had a lot of a lot of good interactions with people because of?
He was like raised to be in Pharisees.
Yeah.
So he had all that.
Yeah. He
background.
was the Pharisee of Pharisees. He was, he listed his credentials a few times just to show I could have trusted in this. Philippians 3, the beginning part of that, he's like, I could have, because look at all I used to have. Like the glory days, way back when. I was doing real good. But what did he look at that as when he became a Christian? Rubbish. He's like, that's trash. Like, that's garbage. And I mean, the word he uses is like super strong, apparently. And like, this is going to be gross, but like trash can juice. Like, imagine that. Like, that's disgusting. But he's like, this is what I view all of my prior accolades and really what motivated me and what motivates a lot of other people. And it is just, it's disgusting. I just want to forget about it entirely. But then there was something else that happened, that Paul did, that he could look back in the past in a different way. He viewed himself as the chiefest of sinners. Why was that? Because he persecuted Christians. Yeah, he was in charge of mistreating them, putting some to death. And that was major. So no matter what it is, sometimes when we think too much about our past, the good or the bad, it can weigh us down. And what we got to do is what he says in Philippians 3. We need to forget what came before, what lies behind, and reach forward to what lies ahead. Like that's our perspective. That no matter if our past was really, really good or if it was really, really bad, like just forget all that, because what matters is what we're doing right now with our relationship with the Lord. Are we being humble? Are we serving Him? Are we following Him? And I mean, there's tons of Bible examples of that, especially when you look at like the kings of Judah. Like some of them started out real bad, but then turned out to be good in the end. And some of them started out real good, but then turned out to be bad. And I mean, we can never just trust on what came before. We can't say, oh, the older days used to be so much better. No, focus on what you got right now, because that's not going to be helpful in any way to reflect on that. So, like Paul, we have to let go of our past, pursue Jesus. He is the one thing in our life that we're focused on. He is what motivates us and drives us, and that's what we do. We have a different focus than we would have before. Any other thoughts on that? Now, the last section here, there are heroes all around. There are people that you could look to as doing great things. And, it's kind of strange, because if you know people who are in so there's some examples here, modern heroes, people who are teaching and training young Christians in Bible classes and camps. Like, that's awesome. That is a very important work, and that is great, all the people who can be involved in that. Preaching, spreading the word of God around the globe. Like, we look up to people like that, right? And we're caring for orphans, widows, the poor, the sick. Like, those are all important works, and we see people doing that, and it's like, how do you do that? Like, how do you keep getting involved with that? Like, that's just amazing. And people using their hospitality and talents to build up the local church. I mean, there are a lot of people doing a lot of great things for the Lord. Now, if you ask them, hey, are you a hero? They're like, no. Like, I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do. That's what God expects. That's the thread that holds all of these biblical heroes together. They're just doing what God wants them to do. Whatever form that takes, whatever it looks like, we could be encouraged by that. So I would encourage you, think through the people who have influenced you, people who have just really stood out to you. There are tons, even in this room right now, people that I look up to and I really respect. And just think about that and take encouragement, because there are people who are doing the right thing. There are people that we can look at as being examples, as being helps, and I hope that we could take that seriously and really consider that, because sometimes when our zeal fires are burning pretty low, we can get encouragement from looking at people who have come before us, even people who are currently living right now who are doing the right things. We're not alone. Don't be like Elijah and be like, I am the only one left. There's still 7,000 who haven't bowed down to Baal. Like, there are people who care. And that's what we should focus on. All right. Thank you guys for this great class. A lot of good stuff, a lot of great comments and questions. We will do lesson 22, last lesson, Lord willing, Wednesday night. Thanks, everybody.